Good morning, Mohammed. Mohammed Rustom is an associate professor of Islamic studies at Carleton University in Canada. He's currently a senior fellow in the Library of Arabic Literature here at University of New York University, Abu Dhabi. Mohammed is currently working on a medieval author, Ayn al-Qudat al-Hamadani, and translating for the Library of Arabic Literature his book Zubdat al-Haqa'iq. Welcome, Mohammed.
Well, thank you very much, Bilal.
My first question to you, Mohammed, how do you translate the title of Zubdat al-Haqa'iq?
Yeah, that is a great question. I would venture into a more literal translation, because what I have right now as my working title is the Quintessence of Reality, which is it's a little heavy because people don't encounter the word quintessence every day, but it really captures well what the zubda would be in Arabic. A colleague of mine once suggested that we call it the cream of the crop, or some kind of
butter.
Or I think Shaukat Turawa jokingly, he said to me, we should call it I can't believe it's not butter, one of these. So, and at one point I had entertained calling it the point of it all, right? Just to really just to get the idea across. But I'm sticking with, for now, the quintessence of reality, and it requires maybe like a subtitle. So I have it right now as The Quintessence of Reality, a Sufi philosopher's vision of God, prophecy, and the afterlife, which are the three main things that he deals with in that text.
So who is Ayn al-Qudat?
Well, Ayn al-Qudat Hamadani, he was a very important philosopher and mystic and legal judge, and a great scholar of literature, Arabic and Persian literature, in the 12th century of the Common Era. And he died in 1131, and he was the student of the Abu Hamid al-Ghazali's brother, Ahmad al-Ghazali. And he's unique in the history of Islam because he is probably the first author to concretely try to fuse philosophy and mysticism in a way that is clearer than Avicenna did, and in a way that takes it much further than what Ghazali kind of laid out in some of his works, especially some of his later works. So Ayn al-Qudat, he's unique in that he's trying to forge an intellectual exposition of the Sufi way. And in some sense, he anticipates what's going to come after him from Ibn Arabi onwards. Now, in the past, I would have thought that comparing or bringing Ayn al-Qudat into the conversation of Ibn Arabi, who comes 100 years after him, would be a little bit far-fetched because he wrote mostly in Persian. Nevertheless, the Zubdat al-Haqa'iq, this book, The Quintessence of Reality, which he wrote in Arabic, was very influential on the Arabic tradition, and Ibn Arabi cites the book by name, which is very surprising.
Very rare.
Because it's rare. In Ibn Arabi, when he mentions the authors that he reads, he'll give you all the information you need to know about them and his opinion of them too. Right? He doesn't shy away from. But it's a relatively short list when you look at all of his writings. How few are the individuals whom he cites. Then you'll find Mu'tazili authors he cites a few of the Sufis' sayings, of course, actually many of the Sufis' sayings in the past. When it comes to books, it's not a humongous list that he gives. So that's a rather unique phenomena as well. Ayn al-Qudat was also extremely influential on the later Persian tradition. So when we think about love literature in Islam, we associate it with names like Rumi and Attar and Shibistari and Iraqi and all of these individuals, all of whom were preceded by Ayn al-Qudat and who drew on his writings. And we can trace very concretely how he influenced them. In some cases it's difficult, but we know that he's had a very important life in the history of the later Persian Sufism, and especially in what's today India and Pakistan, the subcontinent. He was read and commented upon by Chishti authors in the tradition, also the Suhrawardiya Sufi order. They cited him often. So he appears in, his book, the Tamhidat in Persian, was commented upon by Gisu Daraz, but also many other authors, Masood Bak, Nizamuddin Awliya, all of these really major figures in the later Indian tradition are citing Ayn al-Qudat as really this representative, one of the best representatives of what is called the Madhab al-Ishq, or the school of love. So he was a great author who wrote on the love theory in Islam, and also the theory of beauty, when he influences Baqi in this regard as well. And at the same time, he didn't shy away from delving into the more philosophical, problematic discussions, and in fact, he tried to really forge a way between the two and kind of present maybe the earliest, a sample of what later what we would call theoretical Sufism or philosophical Sufism.
What are some of the ideas that we find in Zubdat al-Haqa'iq, to zoom in into this book that you're translating this year?
Well, the Zubdat al-Haqa'iq, it embodies many of the teachings that we were referring to concerning the question of the relationship between philosophy and mysticism, and then this pathway to love. And there are a lot of different ideas that come up in the book. It's kind of like, it's a small book relatively. It's only 100 pages, but it's kind of like flashes of lightning. They really hit you. And what's really intimidating about it is that he wrote the book in 3 days. He tells us in one passage in one of his writings, he says he wrote it in 2 to 3 days. And he was only 24 years old when he wrote it, which was 10 years before his death. So he was a very young man. He wrote this book, and he deals with a number of problems in rational theology that were important and contemporaneous in his day, largely by virtue of Ghazali's influence. So one of the ideas we find in the book is he has an argument against Avicenna, siding with Ghazali on the question of God's ability to know particulars. So Avicenna famously said that God only knows particulars in a universal way, and Ghazali and the incoherence of the philosophers didn't like that, so he responds to that. Ayn al-Qudat sides with him on that issue. So there are ideas like that he deals with. He deals with the relationship between time and eternity. But he always has an eye on taking us back to the essentials of what all of this knowledge is for. It's not a theoretical exposition just on its own. Rather, he wants to really demonstrate the presence of God in our lives and in the universe in a very concrete way. So one of the ways he does that is he tries to explain in a series of passages in the book how it is that God is with us, and at the same time how it is that we are with God, but by virtue of God's being with us. So this is like a version of what we'll find later in Sohrawardi, this doctrine of the presential knowledge, al-ilm al-huduri. And Ayn al-Qudat, by doing that, he takes away, the human certainty in their own awareness of things, and he roots it back in God's awareness. So he's very much a proponent of a view that was made popular by Avicenna, and later on it had a long life in the history of Islamic thought, which is kind of like it's the understanding that God. Because God is the witness of things, that's why they have their reality. And so we witness those things through His witnessing them. And that's why there's that verse in the Quran, أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِ بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. So Ayn al-Qudat very much sides with that understanding of this kind of ever-present knowledge of God. Then he relates the knowledge of human beings in knowing these kinds of realities to our path of understanding by way of our normal rational faculty, the intelligence, and then a certain faculty that's above that. So he calls this, famously again following Ghazali, the stage beyond the intellect. And he says that the stage beyond the intellect, it gives you a kind of knowledge that intellectual knowledge can confer, but only in a theoretical way. So you can know, how a strawberry tastes, for example. You can have a good theoretical knowledge of it, but you won't really know what it tastes like until you actually bite it. Then you'll know how it's distinct from other sweet things like honey or white, milk chocolate or something like that. But that knowledge, it's much more direct. So he doesn't have like an affective or sensorial understanding of knowledge and knowledge acquisition, but it has more to do with the palpable reality of how we experience the world, right? We don't experience the world just in purely theoretical terms, right? We experience it in our bodies and in our souls. So he has a lot to say about how we should live this reality. Of course, the natural conclusion for him is if you live in yourself, then you can't be ignorant to the fact that you as a human being love things, people, ideas, concepts. And that's the case with everybody. That's why the Sufis say we all love something.
Yeah.
right? We're all lovers of something. And the reason we're lovers of something, Ayn al-Qudat and others say, is because God is the lover. Al-Wadud, right? The lover. So we love because He loves. And Ayn al-Qudat says, what you need to love is you need to love what He loves. And so in this book, he tries to take us along the path of how to acquire that love through giving up our own self-love, through cultivating a deeper sense of spirituality, and through meditation and prayer and invocation, and then ultimately going to this kind of sphere or this scope beyond the intellect, which is not anti-intellectual, but it confirms practically what we've already understood theoretically vis-a-vis our relationship to God and the world.
Thank you for this very nice and detailed tour of Zubdat al-Haqa'iq. Why Zubdat al-Haqa'iq today?
Yes.
Right? Why choosing this book for the
Yes.
Library of Arabic Literature? And why should an English reader pick up this book and read it in English?
Yes, no, that is the fundamental question. That's the million-dollar question. This book, Zubdat al-Haqa'iq. When I first read the book and I understood what he was trying to do, one of the things I thought to myself was, where has this been my whole life? I did an undergraduate degree in philosophy, and I read all kinds of really interesting things, but very rarely were there texts from the Islamic tradition or other non-Western traditions, and in which in many ways mirror our own concerns with the world. As I was reading atheist French authors from the early 20th century, and I couldn't see myself in them.
Yeah.
When I encountered a book like this, I was like, wait a second, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
Like Mike Marmora once said when he discovered Avicenna, he said, this is philosophy, this is good philosophy. So it was kind of like that with Ayn al-Qudat. I was like, this is philosophical. This is really, he's talking about all of the things that we naturally encounter in this world, and the question of who am I? And where am I, and what am I doing here? It's never gone anywhere, of course, but it's really come to the forefront when there's so many challenges to our own sense of identity and our own individuality. We have so much knowledge, but amidst all of that knowledge, it feels like we've almost lost who we actually are. So in this book, he tells you, look, you need to first go back to figure out just some of the most basic things. He calls them the awwaliyat, just the very, very fundamentals. Right? There's reality. We're here. There's the realm of existence. This is not imaginary. And now that we're here, we need to figure out what we're doing here. So who am I? The fundamental question of who am I? He confronts it directly. So it makes it, at once timely and timeless because of that. And he insists that it's only through the path of love that we can truly actualize our own human nature. Now, in this book, he does this in a very intellectual way, but it's all of the ingredients are there to extrapolate and say, wow, he's really after the path of certainty. And he says that if you want real certainty, you have to look at the examples in life that give you certainty. So, for example, when someone falls in love with a person, or anything, could be a concept. When that happens to them, it could be even a television show that they really like, or a sport. That certainty that you have in the object of your love, nobody can take that away from you. And Ayn al-Qudat says, we need to cultivate that for the basis of all of existence, God, and that will naturally engender in us a love for every human being, all sentient beings, even rocks, which are not dead. For someone like Ayn al-Qudat, they're very much alive. And then, of course, for ourselves. And I see that as the most important teaching for our time, the cultivation of love and respect for any and all things.
Thank you. We look forward to reading the Arabic text, the critical Arabic text, and the English translation of Zubdat al-Haqa'iq of Ayn al-Qudat al-Hamadani. Thank you, Mohammed.